Today on Locked On Red Wings, should the Red Wings go out there and get remaining free agent John Klingberg? Also, will these Detroit Red Wings prospects make the roster out of training camp?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I am a podcast producer for WWJ News Radio 950. Well, Scotty is a freelance journalist for the Detroit News, as well as the host of Locked On Tigers. I was thinking about this the other day, Scotty. I work for a news radio station now. So am I, by proxy, also a writer now?
Do you write for a living?
Well, don't ask me that. Just answer the question.
Am I a writer now? Do you write stuff that gets published?
I write headlines, and then I write the little descriptions when posting audio clips. I write things. I don't write articles.
If you were to meet someone for the first time, and they were like, "Hey, are you a writer?" What will your answer be?
I'll be, if you ask my friend Scotty, yes, I am.
I hate that. I hate everything about that.
All right. Anyways, enough with messing with Scotty. So a couple days ago on 32 Thoughts podcast, Jeff Marek and Elliotte Freidman linked right defenseman John Klingberg to the Red Wings, suggesting Detroit as the ultimate destinations for him. And although the caveat to that being not at the term that he wanted. And we've talked about John Klingberg a lot over this past season. In fact, when we first started looking ahead at free agency, he was somebody that I pointed out as somebody I wanted in a Detroit Red Wings uniform because of that insane offensive upside that he brings. But as the season went on and I looked more and more into him, I kind of soured on him. You know, he's already, I believe, 31 years old. I'm sorry, that's not true. He's 29 years old at this point. But he'll be on the wrong side of 30 very shortly.
Well, he's going to be 30 literally in like 2 weeks.
Like 2 weeks. So he'll be 30 by the time the season starts. He's got tremendous offensive upside as a defenseman, but defensively, he leaves a lot left to be desired. And this is a team that's trying to get better defensively, and we already have a guy in Filip Hronek who has that offensive upside that you're looking for. Do we need to carry two guys at that, and one who's going to be much older and carry a term out of his prime?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like we had the conversation literally yesterday about like the third line for defense is a little still you could bring in somebody else. We don't have six dudes that you're walking in there with on the blue line that are like these six dudes are the six to be really good. They're going to be the six guys all year. Like the third line is pretty wishy-washy still, to be honest with you, on the blue line as far as who will be there every day. And we're going to talk, about Edvinsson and whatever later in the show, but obviously you don't pair him with Hronek, but if you brought him in and made him whatever, hit the second line and then Hronek was the third, or if you want to do vice versa, but in theory, I don't think it's like, his style of play it prevents him from being effective here. I think this is why I'm not sure there's an overwhelming desire or need to make sure that John Klingberg was a Detroit Red Wing. If he came in and we didn't have to do too much or move enough around to make sure that he was here, I guess I'd be fine with it. But I don't think this is I'm going to go completely out of my way to make sure that John Klingberg is a Red Wing type of player. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so there are a couple of factors really to focus in on with John Klingberg that I don't think there's really necessarily room on this roster for another player like him, especially when, as you can see here, if you're looking at the player card, his goals above replacement for offense are stellar. He's a top 20% defenseman when it comes to producing offense, but his defensive rank is 2. In fact, his defensive goals above replacement is so bad, Scotty, that it falls outside the range in which evolving hockey can track. That's what that little dotted line means by that bar. His expected goals above replacement fall so poorly outside of the range that it cannot track it. And that is very concerning. But there is something to consider with the fact that he played as well, just like Ben Sherratt, played a lot of top line minutes. You can see it down in his distribution down here in the player card. He played the bulk of his minutes on either pair 1 or pair 2. And on this Red Wings team, he probably is not going to play pair 1. And on this Red Wings team, if the reports are true and he doesn't get the term that he wants, if you sign John Klingberg, who's about to turn 32, a 3 max 4-year deal, and you put him on pair 2, which would knock Hronek down to pair 3, in an ideal world, at least in my opinion, or maybe put him on pair 3. Then maybe you get better production out of him because he's playing in a less, with less responsibility on his shoulder. A lot like your argument you made the other day about Filip Hronek with, Olli Maatta giving him more availability to do what he wants, be a little bit more creative. You could make the same argument with John Klingberg if you bring him in. So I think, the argument could be made. Okay, also, he's a 6'2" Swede defenseman, which also is something that Steve Yzerman loves a lot. So I think the argument could be made if the term is right, and that's always the caveat. But if it's just 3 or 4 years, and that's a dream world, but if it's 3 or 4 years and you can put him on the second or third pairing, there's a world where this is actually a pretty sneaky good signing for the Detroit Red Wings to produce more offense. It's just, do you need another guy on an already, I won't say necessarily deep, but crowded defensive core after all the signings Yzerman has made?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, I'm not against him ending up here, and he would, if like we looked at the third line and what the third line is going to look like yesterday, and there's no way, objectively, if you were to bring in John Klingberg, then the defensive 6 guys, whoever you predict to be at the bottom 2 pairing, would improve. You can kick out whoever ends up being the third defenseman, it would be better, and that's pretty objective. The thing is it going to improve enough to what you are gonna have to pay him, etc., to justify going out of your way to bring him in? And if he ends up here, that's fine, and I'm pumped. Again, it's an improvement over what we currently have there out of the 6 people you pulled to be on the blue line. But at the same time, it's I don't think I'd move mountains to make sure that John Klingberg was a Detroit Red Wing either.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I said, I'd be okay with it if they signed him, depending on the term. But he's not somebody I'm going out there and I'm like, let's get 6 months ago. You asked me, I'd be like, yeah, let's get him. Now I'm like, I probably don't really need him. I think eventually he will get paid a pretty decent contract and go somewhere if he does not end up staying in Dallas. But I mean, you look at your defensive core as it stands after you signed 3 defensemen on day 1 and day 2 of free agency. So now you have. Seider, Charo, Olli Maatta, Filip Hronek, Mark Pysyk, Jordan Osterley, Jake Wallman when he gets healthy, and that's 7. I feel like I'm forgetting, Simon Edvinsson possibly, who we'll talk about next segment, by the way, guys, so stay tuned. But, I mean, you signed John Klingberg, and now you have Steven Kampfer. Oh, my God. They signed Steven Kampfer before free agency even opened out of Europe. So, I mean, now you have the potential, if you sign Klingberg, potential of 9 defensemen. I mean, that's good. It's a good problem to have. But, who's the odd man out? And what's, it's just, there's, like I said, there's an argument to be made. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And I put a lot of faith, Elliotte Freidman and Jeff Merrick aren't nobodies. And so when they say things like that, they don't say it without a basis. They don't say it without having heard rumors. My big thing is just, why?
Yeah, no, I mean that's again, me too. I'm If he ends up here and they make room and don't do anything brash to make sure that there's room for him, like I'll be okay with it, and I'll be pretty happy with the end result. But I'm just, as it stands right now, like optically, I'm not really sure how or why that's like a thing the Red Wings would go out of their way to make sure happen.
Yeah. And again, with the possibility of Simon Edvinsson making this team, that's going to add another piece that you have to consider. Of course, he has to earn it, and we'll talk about that. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about Built Bar, from the people who invented healthy and screw the read. Screw the read, Scotty. We're going off the board here. They sent us recently another box of Built Bars. And they sent us cookie dough and s'more. The cookie dough was a puff, and the s'more was a regular bar. That cookie dough puff was legit delicious. It actually had chunks of cookie dough in the puff. And you know what? And I'll be honest, the first time I tried a puff, I was a little unsure whether or not I liked it. And the more and more I have a puff, it's just I love it more and more over the regular Built Bar. And the cookie dough one is another one that I've really liked. First, it was the birthday cake they sent us. Then it was, I think, a chocolate chunk or a brownie, and now it was cookie dough. And all three of those puffs have been legit amazing. That it's almost unfair that there is protein bars that taste this good, and I'm going to sound like I'm reading the read here, but are good for you. They have a lot of protein and they have low carb. So if you're like me and I'm trying to get a little bit bigger at the gym, Built Bars are for you. It's true. I go to the gym. I'm trying, man. You're just laughing at me. Say something.
If you're like me and trying to get bigger at the gym was just funny.
I go 5 days a week. I just
I
don't drink enough protein
you
shakes.
do. It's just, like it's just funny.
Oh, Scotty.
I'm just imagining like absolutely just like swole. He just sits down one day, he's way bigger.
I like to imagine I used to be a little bit buffer, but I was never like ripped or jacked or anything.
Soon.
But I mean,
thanks to Built Bar.
Soon. And thanks to the fact that I work a normal schedule again. Thank you, WWJ. I appreciate you for the normal schedule. Much appreciated. Anyways, check out Built Bar Puffs. They are amazing, and that is a genuine stamp of approval right there. I really enjoy them.
They're unreal. I took a box over to my buddy's house, and we ate the entire box in that night. It was unbelievable.
So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com if you want to get swole like me. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. So ridiculous. Scotty and I are going to transition now to talking about a couple of prospects we feel have a legitimate shot of making the Red Wings roster despite how crowded it is. And you know what? It's crowded for all the right reasons. Because Steve Yzerman doesn't want to just hand roster spots over to these rookies. They have to earn it. They have to play at training camp and in preseason like an NHL caliber player. And look who earned it last year. Lucas Raymond earned it. Going into that, there were very few people, and I think Nolan was actually on the Lucas Raymond to make the team train.
He was one of the first. No, he was. I give him credit to this day because he started it back in
He started before Steve Yzerman knew, because even Steve Yzerman said he was going to go to the AHL.
It was like April or May. Like the previous season, I think it was actually right after the last season ended. Like not last season, the season before last ended. And yeah, he was straight up like he was like, yeah, like Raymond's making the team out of camp next year. And I was like, you are wild, dog. And then sure enough, yeah, I still give him credit to this day.
Well, I mean, even with the Verona injury, it was still like there's still a lot of players in that lineup on that roster. He still beat them out and played top line minutes off the bat. And like I said, even Steve Yzerman was amazed. So Simon Edvinsson, Jonatan Berggren, and Elmer Soderblom are three guys who I'm looking at going into this training camp as guys who could potentially make the roster. Now, notice I left off William Wallander. That's because Steve Yzerman, and granted, he could pull a Lucas Raymond. I guess it is fair to say that the under 20 player of the year for the SHL could make the roster if he just impresses. But early indications say that he's going to play another year with the Rogla of the SHL. I'm getting really good at pronouncing that, by the way. But Simon Edvinsson, let's lead off with this guy because he's the biggest name the Red Wings fans are looking at. He was selected in the 2021 draft, 6th overall. Scotty, do we think that with as many defensemen are already under contract at the NHL level with the Red Wings, that Simon Edvinsson could not just make the roster, but play meaningful minutes with the Detroit Red Wings?
Yes, I do. And I think that we will actually have a real pulse on how the organization feels and how he is progressing through camp and preseason, which I will almost assuredly assume that he will be here for both of those events. So I think that then is when, so like if we're just going to compare it side by side to the Raymond thing, right? Raymond, all off season, the general consensus was like, no, like probably not, right? And then he got to preseason and he looked really, really sharp, and everybody was like, oh, like maybe. And then he made the team, and we were like, oh my goodness, like this is awesome. Kind of surprising, but he did play really well in the preseason. And then the front office was like, hey, like idiots, like no Verana. He was pretty much always going to. And we were like, oh yeah. So like, you know what I mean? So like with Edvinsson, I think it's it might be a situation where right now, I don't know. I go back and forth on like where I'm at right now. If you had to ask me today, July 21st, I'd probably say he like first day, no, but like I think that he does play meaningful minutes this season, just maybe not on opening night. I don't know. I go back and forth a lot.
See, and I'm in the same boat as you. I saw coming out of the season, like as the season ended, I was like, yeah, he's pretty much a lock to make the team. And Steve Yzerman during the exit interviews, they asked him about Simon Edvinsson, and he was, Steve Yzerman the way he was, but he said a few things that would lead you to believe that Edvinsson had a legitimate shot, and he does. He very much so does. He had a phenomenal year in the SHL with Frölunda that ended him with being a finalist for Rookie of the Year. He had 19 points in 44 games. 17 of those were assists, just 2 were goals. But offense isn't his game. Like it's been noted that he doesn't have quite the offensive upside as Moritz Seider, and nor should you compare him to Moritz Seider. But what he excels at is using his size, using his stick length inside the defensive zone. He's very good at gap control. He's very physical. And when he does get the puck on his stick, it's hard to knock him off the puck. He is, touted at 6'6" as this top level defensive defenseman. In fact, I'll just read you the blurb, because this blurb that Elite Prospects has on him from the last year's draft, it just is everything you need to know about this guy. Edvinsson is a detailed defender with high-level in-zone instincts, a tight neutral zone gap, well-timed physicality, and supporting instincts to match. He maneuvers with the puck kept in his hip pocket, with his top hand in control, free from his body. With a smooth and gracious skating stride, scaffolded on top of those mechanical handling skills. A lot of really nice adjectives here. Edvinsson's tools seem to take him to rarefied air as a puck carrier. So not only is he he's very solid in the defensive zone, but he's good at zone exits as well, which is something this team struggled at this past year. So this is from the draft, and he only improved on it this past year. We've heard and saw highlights all year long about how much he has improved. Yes, he's going to have to earn it, Scotty, but I think he very well could. I mean, Lucas Raymond, like we said, we keep going back to Lucas Raymond. But Moritz Seider had to earn it too. And these guys earned it. So if he's ready, he will make the team. But he will not make the team unless he can play meaningful minutes right off the bat, because they're not going to have him make the team and then just healthy scratch him every night.
Yeah, for sure. And that we kind of had a similar conversation with Veleno this year, right? Where we were like, hey, he probably deserves to be on the team, but like if he's not going to get minutes, there's no point. So I absolutely agree with that. The thing is that as we just talked about in the first segment, the third line for this team is I don't want to say bad, because it's not a train wreck like it was last year, but it's certainly a lot more of probably like a revolving door situation where like the top 4 I think are pretty much solidified, whereas the bottom 2 there on the blue line are kind of a little more of a conversation to have. So I think that it's just fascinating in the sense that he could, the second he gets called up, you could plug him on the third line and give him 12 minutes a night. And I think that you could get him consistent playing time, because I don't think there's anybody in the leftovers is probably like a really insulting way to put that. But for the remainders from like the top four defensemen, like everybody else, I don't think there's anybody in that group that is going to uh, demand or deserve like solidified guaranteed playing time over Edvinsson when he is ready to come up. I can't imagine that there's anybody in that group that's going to be like, hey, like this guy, I don't think anyone was going to garner that.
Completely agree with you, man. We're going to continue this conversation with a couple of other prospects, but first we got to get to another ad break. And when we come back, we'll continue the conversation, which I already said. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, let's do Elmer Soderblom. I think he's another guy who's really exciting to think about, but I also think he probably has the smallest percentage chance of making the team out of training camp unless he wows, which is the big caveat to all of that. On Elite Prospects, he's already listed next season as playing with Grand Rapids Griffins. So we already have confirmation that he is coming overseas. And we kind of knew that because the next step in his development, we saw him dominate with Frölunda, especially in the playoffs. He played fantastic in the playoffs with 6 points in 9 games for Frölunda. But he's going to come over to a smaller ice surface and probably will see AHL playing time to start just so we can adjust to the smaller ice surface. But for a guy his size, and again, he's listed at 6'8", 249 pounds.
Big boy.
His strengths are stride and stick handling. A guy that large to be as agile and smooth as he is unheard of, which makes him probably, honestly, one of the most, if not the most exciting prospect that Red Wings fans are looking at. Obviously, there's your number one top round picks in Simon Edvinsson and Marco Kasper, but Elmer Soderblom, I think is right up there with those guys just because he's got such a unique mix of physical traits and physical abilities.
Yeah, he's one that it's definitely gonna take seeing him play this season to see. I think it's pretty safe to say like not making the team like out of camp or out of the preseason or anything, but it is a guy that could develop really quickly. But I also think they want to take their time with him just because he is such a unicorn, right?
Yeah.
In the sense of like he's a huge dude that like literally his strengths are the strengths of a 5'11" person. He's almost a foot taller than that. Like, so because he's such a unicorn and because he's so unique, I think that they're gonna want to like really make sure that he's ready to go to the next, the next step and the next phase of development and the next level wherever he's at this year to start off the season. So I think I love watching him play, and I can't wait to have like more access to watching him play this year. But I can't imagine that it's going to be at the NHL level early on.
I mean, we're talking about a guy who coming into the season was 20 years old, played in one of the best professional leagues in the world with men, and got 20 years old. He's a man as well, but 20 years old, had 21 goals and 12 assists for 33 points in 52 games played. And then again, exploded on the scene during the playoffs to the point where his head coach was saying that he was the best player on the team during the playoffs, during their short 9-game playoff run where he had 3 goals and 3 assists. So I think he is a little bit, I won't call him a project player, but there's still a lot of work left to be done. And that's why I think it's wise to bring him over to the American Hockey League to play with Grand Rapids so you can get a taste of American ice sheets.
Do you think AHL opening night?
Yes, I think that's more than likely, again, unless he wows, which is because I was saying the same thing about Lucas Raymond last year, that he was going to open the night, open the season with Grand Rapids.
For me, I think if you're confident in an AHL by opening night, I'll agree with you. I think game 82, he's AHL this year, and then I think next year is when we are having this same conversation we had with Edvinsson, but with him.
I think that's probably the most likely situation with him. He also, because he can play both wings, and as we've talked at length now in the last couple episodes, the wings are flush with wingers, like absolutely flush with them after all the signings they
Very,
made.
very deep at that position.
They signed Kopp, who will more than likely be the center, but can play wing. They signed Perron, who's a winger. They signed Kubalik, who's a winger. They signed, oh my God, I'm drawing a complete blank right here. But, they signed those three guys.
Perron? Did you say Perron?
I think I said Perron. Yeah.
You said Perron. You said Kubalik.
I said Kopp.
I mean, I mean, we already have Burt. We already have Raymond. You know what I mean? Like,
you have
like Zadina,
Fabry when he's healthy.
Fabry when he's healthy. Yeah.
Wow, that was a brain fart of all brain farts. But yeah,
I was like, what is he tripping about? Those are the signees.
For some reason, my brain had it like there was one more guy. I'm not even gonna cut this out. I don't even care. We ball, boys,
we ball, baby.
And ladies. But yes. I think that he is one of those guys that probably next year you're looking at for sure. Jonatan Berggren, I think, is probably the second most interesting guy to talk about with this conversation. Because
I think he's
he's between
the most, honestly. Yeah.
He's between a rock and a hard place, I think, to be honest, because he's too good to play at the Grand Rapids Griffins level. He was fantastic last year, broke their points record for a rookie that was held by Teemu Pulkkinen. And he seems like he's just NHL ready. In fact, we had Andrew Romaldi on to talk about his season back at the end of the regular season. And he said that Jonatan Berggren looks like he's ready to take the next step. The problem is this guy who can play both center and wing, likely to start at wing at the NHL level, at first at least. I mean, again, same situation. There's so many wingers. So where do you put him? You want to give a guy like that, meaningful minutes because he seems like a playmaker, a finisher. Seems like a guy who could really produce, but you're so backed up with NHL level talent. Where do you slot a guy like this? It's a tough situation. That's why I think he's caught between a rock and a hard place. Because what left does he really have to learn at the Grand Rapids Griffins level? But can he outcompete the guys on the NHL roster already? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think he's the most fascinating one going into camp because, like, again, we did just flush out and bring in a ton of forward depth. And I think in a perfect world, you're giving him like third or fourth line minutes. And I am certain that he will play minutes for the Detroit Red Wings in this season. It's just a matter of whether that is A, at the very start of the season, and B, how many minutes that is, right? So I think that's a fascinating one. He is right in that in between kind of stage that you talked about. And when you have someone that's at that stage in development, you kind of just have to keep putting them where they're going to get the most playing time. But if he's just going down there and just, averaging 1.5 points a game, like what's even the point of that? You know what I mean?
At a certain point, it will stunt his growth almost.
Right. Exactly.
We had this conversation with Joe Veleno last year. Like, this is a perfect Joe Veleno comparison where I feel like Joe Veleno's, I don't want to claim his development was stunted, but he played very well at the AHL level and then came up at the NHL level and didn't play so well. So he was relegated to bottom 6 minutes. And it feels like his growth just wasn't what it could have been. And so it's a tough. I really want Jonatan Berggren to make the roster. It's just where do you put him?
Yeah, and like I said, I'm almost certain that he's going to get minutes at some point this season. You hope that it's not at the expense of an injury, but no team ever has kept an 100% healthy roster for 82 games. So it's bound to happen at some point. And if if the forward core takes a shot that way, maybe that's a way for him to sneak on there. But yeah, that it is like the only kind of revolving door spot they have right now is fourth line right. I think
is like that meaningful minutes.
Fourth line right wing is really right. Is really the only spot on the roster where it's like, hey, this is kind of an opening, and would you rather him start the season in the AHL and get off to a hot start and dominate people? Or would you rather him get 8 minutes a night with Adam Ernie and Michael Rasmussen / Joe Veleno?
There was a guy I was forgetting.
Michael
Austin
Rasmussen.
Zarnik.
Oh,
Zarnik.
yeah, good call.
That was the guy. All right. With that derailing of a conversation, thanks to me, I think that's a good place to end it, honestly. I think we've got our thoughts pretty well wrapped up on this one.
Yep, I think so.
In an ideal world, they'd all be ready, and I want to see them all in the NHL roster now, but that's just not how it works. So we will see.
Well, I mean, thankfully we brought in enough free agents where like it's not going to be like, oh my goodness, we have to watch someone who's a Band-Aid player and just going to be here for a year while we suck again. Like it's like, okay, like we actually have actual talent ahead of them now.
Well, and again, because I got to keep repeating myself and hammering it home, none of these roster spots should just be given to the rookies. And I completely agree with Steve Yzerman. He made the roster a ton better. And that's what makes this such a difficult conversation to have, because there's no one that you can just say that Simon Edvinsson at 21 years old will come over and replace this guy. I think actually Edvinsson's 19. I was confusing him with.
Yeah, he's 19 or 20. Yeah.
Edvinsson, 19 years old, is going to come over and then just replace this NHL vet who's a Band-Aid. Like, it should be a competition. So it's a good problem to have.
For sure.
Thanks for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every single day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute podcast. Any final thoughts, man?
We ball.
We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow, Friday episode. And that is the final episode of our 5-day-a-week format until the start of training camp, I believe. So all of next week.
We'll have a big, more big announcement tomorrow, obviously. And then we'll probably repeat it again on Monday's show.
So we'll be going on 3 episodes a week next week, and then all of August until sometime in September, just because it's the dead period of the off season. But just want to give you guys a heads up. Same time, same place, it's your team every day.
Every day.